This is going to be an interesting matchup. I've actually never seen Archmage run before, but this is going to be an interesting matchup, nonetheless. And it looks like we just started. Unless I'm really delayed.
Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death.
We are good.
Is this a curse? Or some kind of punishment? I often think about the god who blessed us with this cryptic puzzle.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Archmage
to
kill him.
Run either. I know she got a PB yesterday.
This is Command. Your
I believe it was a 151.
Here. All units have penetrated the stratosphere. Autopilot systems green across the board. This is Operator 6-0. All units confirmed. We've passed the 50-kilometer threshold and are proceeding toward the target. Understood. Once you reach their anti-air defenses, proceed.
So, for those of you who are not familiar with Nier Automata, or have never seen Nier Automata before, there's going to be some interesting gameplay that we're going to be seeing. Lots of fast movement, lots of fast combat.
Rely on visuals to evade.
Already engaged. Free movement unlocked.
But one of the defining factors of Nier Automata is mostly the gameplay changes that take place when actually playing the game, whether it be casually or through speedrunning. In this starting section, we're mostly just contained to the flight unit here, so in a very sort of shoot-'em-up style, top-down kind of scenario. The game sort of transitions between multiple different perspectives. I wouldn't really say at random, but at very key moments in gameplay that really add to the experience when playing the game.
1D down. Assuming captain's duties.
And we'll see more transitions of this in a little bit. Right now we're just in... Sorry?
Shabu doing the second AI minute. We're trying.
At least for the first couple minutes, we're just contained to the flight units here.
Mobile configuration. Permission granted.
A lot of this is just killing the enemies as fast as we can to progress to the next phase of the encounter.
Captain, I think 4B down. 2B to Operator 6-0. All allied units down.
They're dead even right now.
Awaiting further orders. Operator to 2B. We need you to rendezvous with Unit 9S and begin gathering data on the local terrain. Understood.
Alright, so like most of, or rather a majority of the gameplay in Nier Automata, that we'll be seeing is actually in the 3D perspective with 2B, and mostly the combat move that we'll be doing is sort of unique to this. Prologue has a lot of things that go on very quickly. It's probably one of the more difficult sections to learn as a newer runner, because so much of these techniques are just hyper compressed into a very small amount of time. But either way, one of the more common damaging abilities that we'll be doing throughout the run is mostly due to the interaction of when you have a short sword equipped in your heavy slot. You've probably heard this from the other commentators as well, but after doing a dash into a heavy attack with a short sword in the light slot, did I say light slot? No, I didn't. Either way, when you perform a damage glitch, it's basically a dash input into a heavy input, and that causes the game to, for whatever reason, have the short sword deal a, what is it, I think it's a 4.5 times multiplier between damage ticks, which is a huge damage bonus for such a simple move. But unfortunately we're skimming over a couple things. Prologue is very dense in terms of the combat, but the gist of this is basically just killing as many of these enemies in as small of a time frame as possible. So a lot of this is relatively optimized.
Yes, Prologue I would consider one of the hardest sections in the game, especially to really feel like you've mastered it. There's a lot of yes, it was a very good bridge skip. It's a very hard section of the game to really to practice, since it's all done in one large segment. There's no save points during the prologue section, so in order to practice it, you kind of just have to do the whole thing.
Looks like Archmage is having a little bit of trouble there on bridge.
I know.
It's most likely one of the more difficult tricks in the game because of how the precise timings of this particular high jump is so unique that the timing is just incredibly precise. Because you're trying to maximize the height gain from each of those attacks that allow you to get up to the top of that bridge and dash across. Which is definitely one of the more difficult skips in this. And mostly because it's right at the beginning of a run as well.
Right.
I surveyed the entire
So Shabu's just leaving Silo 3.
Maybe they, I don't know, moved it somewhere? There should be another facility across that.
Yeah, that lava skip can be a little bit finicky. As Archmage was having a little bit of issue with it. You're completely blind, so you can't judge your height off of actually looking at the screen.
I actually go off the audio cues.
Yeah,
mostly.
That's exactly what I was going to mention. Yeah, the easiest way that I've found to do it is just listening for the audio cues for the attacks. It's not a very strict height, but it does have a decently strict angle to it. If you plunge too far to the right or left, then you just don't clip through.
There's a very clean marks too on Shabu's part. So as most of you are probably aware, Angles, when looking at Shabu's screen, Angles is a very mean boy because we're trying to get a specific RNG out of him at a specific phase. Right now, Shabu's just trying to get him down to a specific threshold, but after a certain point, there's a particular attack that he wants out of Angles. If he chooses the wrong attack, then unfortunately Angles is going to cause a lot of time loss, and especially in a run like this, there's a lot of sections in here that RNG that we get in Prologue directly affects how well the rest of A ending goes. Typically, but mostly this is the largest part of RNG in A ending alone.
What's your status?
This is the target.
And
you got a clap.
Nice.
Nice.
Right. I'll provide support.
Yeah, so the clap is a very minor time loss versus a ranged attack. It only loses about 3 seconds. Any of the multiple punch attacks will lose you 20 to 25. It's a pretty significant time loss. Most runners that I've seen, regardless of time, have started to opt to just reset any run that gets punches. It's quite a large time loss to have to overcome over the course of the rest of the run.
And since it's so early, it's easy
Right.
to reset too. Some of the things later on in the game are much more difficult to reset over. At least for me.
I agree. I agree.
As someone who rarely actually wants to reset, but I digress.
Oh.
Shabu trying some swag there. Unfortunately voiding out.
Hacking in.
Funny enough, you can actually stand on those side pipes when Angles is breaking the platforms. Unfortunately, the devs didn't really think of putting walls there, so you can just stand on those side pipes and be cool. Be a cool cat.
Put on some swag shades.
9S.
Nice. And Archmage also did not get punches. Very good.
We need a punch counter for this entire tourney.
We
on who gets
should.
punches.
You add it to the spreadsheet. Just have punches, yes or no. I have already surrendered myself to getting punches every single run. That's just my luck. That's my luck in a nutshell.
Those who ask for punches never get it.
I found the target. Hacking in.
I'm gonna knock
And
on
those
my
who
desk
don't
here.
ask for punches always get it.
I'm gonna knock on my desk here. Please no.
The control on the enemy's upper arm. Use your pod. Should be able to take it over.
I told you to shut up!
Oh. Unfortunately, Shabu is going to lose a little bit of time there because Angles chose the wrong attack. And mostly because the timing between the dialogue and Angles' swing was off by just a little bit more than we would have wanted.
From enemy unit. Marking weak point. Got it.
Oddly enough, Prologue is actually the most RNG unfriendly part of the entire run, which is actually not too bad since, like Myth said earlier, it is early in the run, so it's not the end of the world if you need to reset.
So Shabu coming out of prologue with a respectable 15-minute prologue. So now that he's in the bunker, it's just a matter of menuing and getting down into the surface as fast as possible.
I'm curious to see if he's gonna go for the stick flick.
How does that go again, Marbles? I'm curious.
Well, we'll see if he does it.
Okay, okay.
I believe he does, but I can't remember.
Morning.
It's a very
I'm sure
interesting
2B also
strat.
makes that sound, right?
I'm sure. If either one of them go for it, then yeah. Then yeah. But if not, I'm sorry. You'll have to just catch it in one of my runs. Or someone else's that wants to do that on stream.
Nah, Marbles, you made the meme, you gotta own it.
The surface?
1653, not a bad prologue. Archmage is pretty new to the game. I believe she's only finished like 3 or 4 runs.
Let's go.
Hey, 2B, why do you think they sent a combat model like you to a recon job? If all they want
So now that Shabu's finished with the bunker, he's transitioned back into the flight units and flying down to the surface. That was a little bit early on that pod launch than he would have wanted. Ideally, that pod program out of the flight unit killed, or should kill all the flight units there.
Here it is. Is he going to? Yep. Oh
my god.
Bunker 2B, come in. I've set a landing point for your flight units. You'll be touching down quite a ways from the resistance camp, unfortunately. Sorry for the trouble, but we can't risk the enemy discovering their position. Understood. Good luck down there.
What a baka.
Baka baka.
So now that Shabu is in the city ruins, what he just skipped into there was the discovery cutscene. Unfortunately, that's actually required, but in many of the other sections, we'll also be seeing similar cutscenes that give sort of an overview of the general area when you first encounter that specific area. It gives you a nice little camera pan, but unfortunately, as speedrunners, we're not very interested in that. So into the resistance camp, we're just going to be doing a couple fetch quests. And yes, the main quest is unfortunately a fetch quest for these 2 vendors, but we need those vendors in a little bit to pick up a better sword and generally go faster. Just a wee bit faster.
Yeah, as most speed runs that involve character levels, enemy levels, damage kind of depends on your difference in level. So being as underleveled as we're going to be, as we skip so much content, getting the upgraded sword is a very nice upgrade. Especially since the fetch quests actually make the first weapon upgrade completely free.
Even though they never pointed out to you.
Exactly.
You can 100% go through the game without having upgraded your weapons.
Plant life has claimed most of the central area. Big plants, too.
Report. Records show that vegetation has grown to an abnormal size since the departure of humans.
And that's sort of something that I found really interesting playing this game casually, is that the game never fully tells you everything about the game. You really have to go out of your way to explore and experiment with things, which is really kind of interesting. So long as you don't look on Reddit or forums or anything. But the general gist of the game, if you go into it blind without looking at any extra material, the game actually doesn't really describe it too much to the player. Which is sort of unique in how it really relies on how the player just sort of freely experiments with things.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said that I knew about taunt from my casual playthrough.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
As the game decides, oh, you don't need to know about that unless you decide to put a taunt chip into your chips.
A little bit of sync here. Shabu just finishing the Weapons Trader quest, and Archmage just beginning the Weapons Trader quest. So now that Shabu has completed the side quests here, he's moving on to the desert section on foot.
The desert heat is going to make resupply efforts difficult, 2B. Please make sure you're ready before you go.
You may see some very odd-looking camera angles during movement here. All throughout the run, because of the game's auto lock-on feature, not having the enemies on the screen makes it so you don't auto-lock to them. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it's probably one of the most despised parts of just like how the game is for a speedrunner.
I think ideally you would actually want to opt for a very small FOV, so that way auto lock-on doesn't actually trigger as often as it normally does. But this game looks way nicer with a wider camera angle and FOV. Just looks so good. So Shabu's making a pit stop here at the Desert Trader. He's going to pick up a couple of materials there. One is a sachet that we'll need for the animals, and an animal bait, a couple buffs, and some recoveries. He's also going to pick up this transporter, and immediately clip right out of bounds.
Also the resilience chip, which is
Yes.
quite a nice upgrade from the old routing. Resilience makes it so enemy attacks will not stagger you if you're above 80% health. Which during the speed run, you're typically just healing every time you get hit. It doesn't take too much time to menu, since we have the quick menu. And Shabu is going for the Desert Discovery skip. This skip it can be very hard to learn, especially as a newer runner. There's a very thin floor that you're still considered out of bounds, but you're not voiding out. Ooh, I wasn't sure he was going to make it.
Weird, but it still worked. It still worked.
Yeah, I wasn't sure he was going to make it with that.
Sand sure is slippery.
Which voiding out, what it does is basically you just fall forever until the game's like, oh, you've been falling too long. So then it will respawn you at the last ground that you were in contact with.
So Shabu's making a little bit of a detour here into the middle of the desert, just to strictly pick up Pod C. And that allows us to gain access to another pod program, as well as a longer slow-mo duration. But I'm not too certain on how Shabu slow-mos very often.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure how much he slow-mos either.
Either way, that's still a
yes.
damage upgrade for sections that involve the flight unit. And even for some of the later fights, like Eve, towards the end of A ending. Here on Archmage's screen, you can see the out of bounds again, right behind the transporter. Ooh, Shabu going for the stupid rock. Unfortunately, the machine in the background did not want to burrow very quickly. That is surprisingly a well-timed clip. Oh, he's going for his own swag. That's so silly. Yes, basically any wall or rock is merely a suggestion. This clip out's basically everywhere in this game. Archmage walking the tightrope here on Desert Discovery.
Very nice.
Oh, I spoke too soon.
Oh, actually, I couldn't even see, honestly. I thought she missed the trigger for a second there.
So here on Shabu's screen, we're clipping out of bounds again. This effectively skips two sort of miniature cutscenes that involve the machine that we had saw earlier at the mouth of the desert housing. The only required trigger here is this sort of invisible one out in the middle of nowhere. Oof. And once we hit that trigger, you can see on the radar that the pit that we need to go to, it has a red circle. And from there, you can just hit that falling platform, and then the fight progresses.
Don't listen to him, 2B.
These mobs are the worst thing in this entire run. You cannot log on to these, and the auto lock-on does not work on them either, unless they're aggroed.
Let's take them out.
So they tend to be pretty bad.
There's definitely a bit of a learning curve towards it, because I find 2B is sort of like a ship that you have to point in the right direction and hope that she damage glitches to the right enemy.
Yeah. Archmage
So you'll notice
also
that
went for stupid rock.
oh, she still got part of it.
Yeah.
The reason why that is called stupid rock is because, well, that rock is just really stupid. When you plunge into it, it's just very slippery and can displace 2B pretty far for what it's worth. So Shabu deciding to self-destruct in the middle of all those machines, killing a good number of them, so that way he gets some extra XP. And going into the Atom fight, he's quickly buffing up and taunting, so that way he can deal as much damage as he can, as possible, rather. Nice. In a very small time frame, so that way he skips a phase that plays another little mini cutscene from Adam. Nice. Relatively quick here on Shabu. Oh, Adam's giving him a little bit of a hard time here.
What's new there for anybody?
Adam is another really mean boss. His hitbox is very small in comparison to some of the others.
Counterattacks are really annoying. Uh-oh.
So you'll notice on Archmage's screen, she's trying to kill as many of those machines as possible so that way she can get some extra XP. Of course, a lot more kills in this fight yields better chips and more XP, which is more relevant towards the end of the run, but is still pretty significant. Definitely having good combat throughout the run is a huge plus to have. Whoa, okay. Shabu opted for a strategy there where, because he had picked up the desert transporter, he's able to push that box about 1.5 times or so, and he's able to quickly pod launch and then dash immediately to the left to basically clip Tubi into the rock face, and you're able to exit the map that way. Now, the reason why that's important is because at the mouth of that tunnel is a dialogue sequence that we had just heard from 210 and 9S. Essentially, we're able to skip that dialogue and immediately save into the save circle of the transporter. And because we saved at the mouth of that tunnel, and we're able to basically reload the save, we can displace Tubi all the way out to the desert camp without losing too much time.
Their black boxes are online, so we presume they're still alive. We've tracked the location of their signal.
So Archmage is finished with Adam. Shabu's in a little bit of a lead here, but we'll see in a little bit. We're making our way to the amusement park, which is by far my favorite area.
Looks like our surface route's been cut off. Maybe we can get through from underground. So 2B, those machines out in the desert look just like androids, right?
Right.
But we androids were modeled after our human creators. So why would machines try to look like us?
There's no point trying to work out unsolvable problems.
I suppose.
So you can see on Archmage's screen attempting what's called Swag Box. Unfortunately, she was a little bit late on that dash into the rock, but she still managed to clip through the box, which, back when I started running, that was swag. Just being able to clip through that box was what we used to do. And through some very genius findings that Marky, our resident glitch hunter and awesome person, breaker, game breaker, I guess. Through some genius engineering, we managed to find that you can actually clip out there. So both runners having to run through... Oh, geez. Shabu having some difficulty on a skip known as Let's Play skip.
Yes, if the angle is a little too far right, then you actually completely miss the floor and just void out completely.
Yeah. What he was trying to do there was basically plunge down through that little crevice between the buildings, and land on the little floor that's directly in front of him. I've never been able to do it with that technique, but
Think it's a good idea to leave that tank behind?
That's an interesting part, because the way you do that skip actually changes based on whether or not you have DLC installed. The DLC will add an elevator there, which actually adds an extra input. You had to cancel your plunge with a jump in order to land on top of it. Some runners like it. Myth actually uses the DLC. A lot of other runners are not a fan of it, and despite having DLC, have uninstalled it for speedruns.
I find it a lot easier with the DLC installed because of that elevator, basically making the angle that you need for getting across the chasm in front of you a lot easier. But
yeah, it's a lot easier. Yeah, it's a lot easier on the height too, because you already start off of the ground, so a little less chance to just void out.
So just now, Shabu is entering Beauvoir. A crowd favorite. Boss fight. Definitely one of the better boss fights in this game.
This was my favorite.
Unfortunately,
What the hell?
Our records don't say anything.
unfortunately, on normal mode, most of her mechanics, and especially in the speedrun, aren't really showcased because we effectively one-phase everything. Like right there, Shabu was able to deal enough damage to Beauvoir in a very short period of time that basically skips all of her other attacks.
After transitioning to the next phase, you would have seen Shabu face towards the right. Reason being for that is when you go into that mandatory hacking section, for some reason the game decides to like just shoot you off to the side if you're just doing it staring at Beauvoir. But if you are facing to the right, then the game just decides, oh, it's fine. And it's really weird. There's a lot of very odd, just like inner workings of this game.
I think Canaris had done some research into it, and the reason as to why, I think it's because during that phase change of 2B being in a 3D perspective to being in the hacking sequence, it's really sort of jarring for the game. And I think Canaris had found that it was like the true north direction kind of thing. If we were to equate a true north to this game, it would be in that specific direction. No matter which hack you do, it's always in that direction. That the game just defaults you to moving quote-unquote forward. It's very rare to actually see it, but it's more noticeable in some of the later runs. Okay.
That was a little scary.
A little bit damaged up there.
Yeah, when you're holding the pod program, you can't quick menu to recoveries. One of the very slight drawbacks to using slow-mo.
So the reason why Shabu's screen is all dark is because he opted to go for a self-destruct at the very end of Beauvoir's death throes. And the reason being is because mostly when you self-destruct, there's a very long slow walk that the game imposes on 2B, and unfortunately we don't really want any of that. It's cool casually, but it's not very cool when we're trying to go fast. But the reason being is because we want to be on 1 HP with as little downtime as possible, and being on 1 HP is more important for this next skip that we're going to be doing in a little bit.
They all have white flags.
Looks like they really don't want to fight.
Oh, Archmage narrowly getting hacked there, but still a pretty good bodies section. If she were to get hacked there, I think that's about a 8 to 10 second time loss, I believe, for every hack.
If I remember correctly, I think Fullest timed it out to 6 seconds for each hack.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's like somewhere between 6 and 10. It also kind of differs depending on how well you do the hacking section.
Let's see if Shabu gets a boar here. And oh, okay. Nice.
Yay.
2B here. What's wrong?
The reason why we want a boar is because of this silliness. The piggy is unfortunately not as fast when sprinting as he is when hopping. So boar hopping is surprisingly fast for how silly it looks.
Especially up hills. Yeah, just wait until this hill. It's so fast.
Boing a boing a boing a boing boing. So fast.
Are you saying you need me to be?
So the reason why we were on 1 HP and why we brought the animal with us is because when we saved at Pascal's village, the game, when we die, our 2B gets returned back to Pascal's village, but the quest progress still remains active. So because we had received the item from Pascal and brought it to the resistance camp, we're now having to return to Pascal's village. But when we die, that quest still progresses. And because we saved in Pascal's village, we actually don't even have to walk all the way back to Pascal's village. We just appear at Pascal's village. So just as one runner is entering Pascal's village, Shabu is leaving.
Pascal's village is quite the popular spot in this run.
Which surprisingly is a huge mouthful to say every single time. And I've opted to say just Pascal's dwarf. But unfortunately nobody understands the meme.
Hey, I do. I just haven't run in German.
You should.
Oh boy.
German's fun.
Oh boy. And it looks like Archmage is going to be getting a moose? Yes.
Yeah, moose looks like it.
I mean...
Oh, did Shabu get mysteriously hit there?
Oh, I didn't even notice. It's very possible. Even when you can't see Engel's arm swing across, there is actually a hitbox where Engels will hit you, despite there not being a visual. It's a little bit odd.
It is the scariest thing, because sometimes you'll just see that it's a clear view straight ahead, and then suddenly his arm goes directly overhead and it hits you, because vertical hitboxes just suck.
And the worst thing that can happen is if he punches you and then you fly back into the fire.
So, for Shabu, coming up right here, he is going into a boss fight that isn't actually required. Looks like he missed the hole in the wall, but he's going to do a quick recovery strat here. And fortunately, that wall that blocks our way is not very tall. And 2B is much more capable than measling walls blocking her way. So this effectively removes the first angles in the city entirely. Only the second angles in this sequence is required.
Good cycle.
Nice quick kill on angles there. Oh no! Oh, that's a horrible time loss.
Yeah, so Pascal actually has 1 HP during these segments, and being the one that you need to interact with for the quest, if you kill Pascal, you need to save your game and then reload the game, or leave the village and then re-enter the village in order to respawn Pascal. It's happened to most of us.
In my first couple runs, that definitely happened to me.
Oh yeah. I actually have that somewhere on my YouTube from like one of my first ones.
Guess we'll see once we get there.
So very quickly here, Shabu's made it into the city ruins again, but it's a little bit different. Now that this hole is opened up in the ground, he's able to progress to the next little fight.
Look at all these dead machines. Seems like they've been here for a long
And
time.
very similar to how the City Angles fight works that we had just seen, the walls that contain this arena are not particularly tall. They obviously don't go to the ceiling, and Platinum supposedly never thought you could escape from this little arena with these invisible walls. But fortunately, through some high jumping magic, walls are merely a suggestion.
We can grow. We can become aware. Eventually, the intelligence within our network began to surpass that of our creators.
So some very quick damage coming out of Shabu there, very good damage glitches.
Oh, there's no need to fret about them. They were simple.
Of course, combat is the largest time save out of anything in this run.
They held no value to us. But the humans on the moon? Now they are interesting.
Why them?
Because they are an enigma. They killed
So you'll see here Shabu getting a counterattack off of one of Eve's attacks, and then progressing with the rest of his high jump. And that enables us to effectively jump over the wall that contains us in the arena, and we're able to escape the fight effectively. Now, this doesn't get us off the hook entirely. The dialogue in the fight is still going on, and once that dialogue finishes, the fight finishes. So, until Eve stops talking, or rather Adam stops talking, then we're free to basically kill any of these enemies within the cave. However, it is worth noting, if you do leave the cave, then that's a pretty huge time loss, because the game thinks you're leaving the area, so it would deload the this sort of spaceship sort of area underground and load in the rest of the city ruins. But as you just saw there, Shabu gets effectively teleported back to where the fight took place, and we continue from there. However, if the map had unloaded from beneath his feet, effectively, he would just be falling forever and would have to load a save.
Transfer your consciousness to a temporary body back in the bunker. I heard some tech guys talking about.
Up next. So still
Their flight.
Ooh, looks like Archmage got not a great cycle with angles there. I believe it was. I believe he was using missiles first. The angles. The missile attack has a very different hitbox. So if Engels is using it in missile attack, a lot of times your missiles will just completely miss, and you won't be able to. You won't be able to do the quick kill with the two programs.
So, Shabu's now back in Pascal's village, and we're going into another little shopping spree that he's going to be doing. First, it looks like he's going to check the weapons trader. He's going to be selling specific elements of his HUD to make some space for some extra chips that he'll be needing, and generally picking up recoveries, larger buffs, and it looks like he was able to upgrade Virtuous Contract level 3.
He was. Virtuous Contract, getting it to level 3, which is completely RNG based, for 2 of the 4 materials you need. It adds about, what was the percentage? I can't remember. 55% damage?
Yeah, it was a pretty significant base damage increase.
Yeah, it goes up a lot. It has a higher attack speed, higher base damage, higher max damage. The downside to it is, because of the attack speed difference, it has a very different sort of clipping power, if you will. It makes some of the later skips in the run a little bit tougher. Well, I get it, probably more than a little bit tougher.
I'd say they're pretty significantly different.
Yeah, especially like the copied cities clip. That's very tough. I don't believe anyone has found a consistent lineup for that still.
I think some of us are better at that than others. This must be the commercial structure Pascal was.
We'll have to see how Shabu fares on some of those skips. Some of the more precise ones are much more difficult, in my opinion, with a higher level sword.
As you see Shabu doing here. Ooh. This game has a lot of long dialogue segments, and we have a lot of ways to skip dialogue. One of which is what Shabu just did there. If you have a chat box open, basically, and you're able to move past the trigger of where a dialogue would normally trigger, then they both will just cancel each other out. So it'll just close his dialogue box, and then the dialogue that was supposed to happen just doesn't happen. We have a lot of other ways you can interact. You can interrupt it with just quick movement, can cause a different dialogue to cancel a previous one, or just jumping completely over the trigger. There's ways to get around most dialogue that we would actually care about for the speedrun.
So long as it isn't required.
Right.
Although I'm not too certain if there are any dialogue segments that are required. It's more trigger-based with cutscenes and areas that you, as a player, need to get to.
Right.
With these guys.
Don't listen to what they're saying, 2B. How are we supposed to reach that castle?
So Archmage is making her way to Pascal's village, and Shabu's in pretty deep in the forest here. Coming up on Shabu's screen, he's going to try to get across this chasm between the mainland and the castle, and it looks like he's opting towards the older strategy. So that strategy that you saw there basically uses the really slippery hillside that's in front of him and a plunge, and tricks the game into thinking that he was initially in the castle area and falls into the water, or rather drown area, that replaces him back on the drawbridge on a location that he was never actually at. Fortunately, that drown area is a little bit bigger than Platinum would have wanted, so we're able to exploit that. And even to the point that we're able to skip most of this castle via some interesting clips. I definitely enjoyed myself when I was learning how to skip this castle by such a simplistic clip.
An android. A Yorha-type android.
Alert. This unit is currently wanted by Yorha. Annihilation recommended.
Annihilation? But why?
So going into A2 on Shabu's screen, A2 is one of the more difficult bosses, I'd actually say.
I would agree with that. Even with resilience to prevent the stagger, it's still a pretty tough fight.
She's a very fast girl.
Yes,
Super fast.
You can really get locked into perfect evades.
What you see in front of you is your enemy.
But she
deserted us.
Fortunately, one of the moves that we actually take advantage of in the speedrun is when she dashes fully across the screen like that, we know that she's going to be coming back in the very center of the arena. And with a well-placed damage glitch, you can actually take her down pretty quick. Another technique that runners use is basically just throwing your swords at her as fast and as reliably as possible, so that way she staggers, and just take her down from there. I know in my race that I just did, I had a really good A2 fight. It was pretty bonkers how fast that can be. So one thing to point out there, normally under any other circumstance, A2 hops out the window and the game encourages the player to also hop out the window. But the problem is that there's a dialogue down there that's like 3 to 4 minutes or so in length, and we're not interested in waiting around in that. So I forget who exactly discovered that you can go around the back end of the arena, but through a careful high jump, you're able to hop over the invisible wall at the back of the A2 arena and effectively escape the area, transport to Pascal's village, and continue on your way.
I can't remember who found that one either.
I want to say it was AB3, but maybe. I might be wrong.
Yeah. I know that was one of the happiest days for the current runner's life, though. That wait is about 1.5 minutes long.
Thanks, 2B.
Still, machines are the enemy.
It's pretty long.
Yeah.
Having to sit through that is pretty lengthy, especially when in a speedrun setting. So now that Shabu's spoken to an enemy, he's trying to clip out here next to the boxes, and that effectively puts him behind the resistance camp area, and he's able to get the triggers that he needs in order to progress to the flooded city. The technique here, I don't think... Oh, ouch. That's going to be a little rough. The idea there is to pick up the entrance discovery cutscene, so that way the rest of the triggers in the Flooded City load. Yeah, and it looks like he's not getting it.
I think he's just a little too forward, or too far forward on that last attempt. There it is.
There we go. So
tough one to learn.
The reason why he was coming back up to the resistance camp area there was mostly because when you fall too far in this game, the game has a function that replaces 2B back on solid ground, or back on the last solid ground that 2B had touched. And because we're all midair during that section, we're able to hit the trigger, void out, get replaced back up at the very top where the resistance camp is, and perform another set of plunges that replaces us down on the Flooded City shore to fight these machines that Shabu is now fighting. It's so cool when you look at it and how it actually works, because it really showcases how intricate the areas are inside of Automata, especially between the resistance camp and the Flooded City. Casually, you would never expect them to be so close. So now that Shabu's entered the flight units again, he's going into a section known as Groon. One of the more, I guess, resident sleeper parts of the run.
This is a good time to get some food, or go to the bathroom, or take a nap. There's a lot of things you can do in this section.
Go to your sleeping accommodation, have a nice little sleeping accommodation.
Yes. Most of Groon is on a timer, so it's similar to like the prologue flight suit stuff, where in order to move forward, you have to, like, you can move it a little bit faster if you clear the waves, just to progress to the next wave, but the majority of the fight is on a dialogue timer. It won't progress until the current dialogue finishes playing, so it's kind of just a 14 to 15 minute auto-scroller.
Auto-scroller's resident sleeper.
Auto-scrollers in my speedrun. Ooh. Yeah, Archmage having a little bit of trouble with this post A2 dialogue skip. It's pretty strict on the amount of height that you need to make it. There we go. It's about the second or third stair down where you can skip or get over the trigger, and it won't turn you back to go back in the arena. The game did program in a wall there that tells you to pursue A2 and go out the window. It's a relatively tight height that's required to get over that trigger.
One thing to actually point out a little while ago when Archmage was fighting A2 is how quickly that fight can actually go from being from the runner being in control of the fight to being completely out of control, and how A2 can really sort of slip through your fingers if you're not careful, with dashing across the screen, attacking you very, very quickly, and just sort of escaping the clutches of your damage glitches.
blocking close-range attacks with EMP blasts. We've got to find another way to damage it.
Shabu is unfortunately not opting for the specific despawn in Grune. I don't think anybody apart from me really goes for it.
Probably not. I mean, considering it can just randomly decide, oh, here, you're gonna lose 4 minutes.
I wouldn't really say it's randomly, but if you don't do it properly, then you'll totally lose time on it.
There it is.
Bit of an interesting pathing from Archmage there, but she still got the trigger. The version of what's called Flooded City Skip that Archmage just performed was a much earlier version of performing that skip, where if you plunge too much to the right, then 2B actually hits solid ground there, and she's unable to hit the trigger that we need from underneath the map. So you'd actually have to re-enter the playable area and still hit the trigger as if you had just walked to the flooded city. And then from there, she was able to just walk through the flooded city as normal. Otherwise, we would have been able to save a couple more seconds and void out back up to the resistance camp and plunge down to the shore that she's fighting on right now. So in a couple seconds here, Shabu's coming up to one of the first sort of mini bosses in Grune. Wouldn't really call it a boss, but the gist of this is to basically kill each of the 4 little cores on this sort of rotating spindle thing, and then defeat the middle core to then progress the fight. Sometimes they can get a little out of hand, though. It is RNG onto which direction each of those 4 mini cores rotates, but once you get them down, the middle one is exposed.
Electromagnetic interference eliminated. Preparing for satellite laser strike.
Funny story, actually. When you skip that cutscene that Shabu just did, you'll notice his camera is really obnoxiously close to 2B.
Having trouble over there?
And it looks like he's just dashing away. For whatever reason, I don't know why the game actually makes that camera angle a thing, but it does. It makes your controls in the flight unit very weird if you skip that cutscene too quickly, and it gives you a really awful camera angle that makes you see nothing. It's always fun to point out, because trying to go fast in this game really sort of breaks some of the core mechanics, or the underlying mechanics at least.
I'll help aim.
This thing's armor is too thick. We need more firepower.
2B, let's try for a more direct approach.
Direct? Oh, right.
That's right. Lay down some fire in its stupid mouth.
Ooh. The timing on that
stupid
mortar. Yeah, the timing on those mortar shots can be a little weird sometimes. 9S isn't very good at helping at aiming. So sometimes you're just gonna hit him in the tooth, or or just it's gonna look like it's going into his mouth and then just completely miss somehow. The game's
I've had them in the opposite way, where it looks like it's gonna hit his tooth or like his jaw, and it actually goes through and hits the hitbox correctly. It's so silly.
Mortar shots are weird.
No one could figure out how to stop it. We eventually marooned it deep in the ocean, but it seems to be searching for
Well, quote-unquote mortar Kappa.
Yeah.
I think I have another
Yeah,
idea.
that is true.
You keep that thing right where it is, okay? What?
This
Please,
is true.
This is gonna work.
Shabu's hitting a fun part in the game where 9S is gone.
As always, 9S disappears, and his plans always work.
He has a plan. Just hold on.
I'm going to see if we can use those missiles back on the shore.
Yeah, it looked like maybe Archmage couldn't skip that cutscene for a second. Yeah, this looks to be this looks like PB pace for Archmage, which would make it the third PB of this journey. I believe the third. That would
third, fourth.
Yeah,
lots of people.
Yeah, we've had Fudge and who else PB'd? Someone else PB'd like today, right? I don't remember.
I forget. Didn't Tech PB or something?
Maybe.
I'm not too certain.
Oh no, I know Tech didn't. Right. Yeah, he has a 133.
Lots of people getting real fast nowadays. And it's quite exciting.
Archmage's current PB should be, I believe it was around 151. There's definitely not 40 minutes of gameplay left in this run.
Yeah, she should be able to smash that.
Should be. Yeah, this should be a pretty solid PB here.
The magic of adrenaline in a race setting.
And Shabu's current PB is, I believe, low 140s or high 139 or high 130s.
I hope we do get a hot world record in the tourney. Can Aris better pull some magic?
I know how Canaris is with his breaks. He comes back better than ever.
D-Rust PBs, Kappa. So Shabu's coming up to the third and final core of Grun, thank God. Grun is so boring for me sometimes.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Oh look, there's flyers to kill. Oh look, kill these cores. Yay. Yes, the timer desync is, we actually never touched on that. We use a loadless timer for this, so it'll the timer will actually subtract all the load screens, which is why there's going to be a little bit of timer desync. I'm interested to see what Shabu does here, having Virtuous Contract level 3.
I am too.
I'm very interested to see if he opts to just skip Copied City skip.
2B to bunker. Come in. Over.
Operator to 2B? 2B, are you alright?
Running system
A little bit of an interesting plunge there. Didn't quite get far enough out in order to get the other drown area.
In regards to the giant
There we are.
attack the shore, it ceased its resistance 8 hours ago following your missile strike.
That secondary drown area that Shabu just got to is surprisingly a lot larger than you think it is.
Data uploading is currently unavailable in some
But
areas.
Where's 9S?
unfortunately, sometimes I still mess it up.
Picked up a faint
I do too.
but it wasn't strong enough
It's
to
understandable.
lock down his position.
If you found something, that means he must be alive. Put in a request to the commander for immediate approval to begin a search.
Actually, the commander has already ordered us to prioritize tracking down surviving Yorha members. If you find 9S, let me know, okay?
Will do.
So just to reiterate, Shabu is coming up to a very precise clip here out of the sewer that enables him to basically skip the pathing from outside the sewer down the hole in the ground and getting to the elevator that progresses the story. Here, you can actually clip out... Oh, looks like VC3 is giving him a little bit of trouble here. I'm not too certain on what angle he actually needs, but he does need a very precise angle, and that's compounded by a higher level sword than we normally have.
I'm not sure anyone's going to make sense of this clip, to be honest.
I know personally when I was doing some testing, the precision of that clip goes up astronomically. Every time I had attempted it, I had clipped and tried the same angle. It had become a different angle that I would be needing to clip through.
The cause appears to be an EMP attack from a gigantic machine life form. If you encounter any offline access points, please repair them for us.
Understood.
So it looks like he's going all the way around. Unfortunately, I'm curious as to what he does for the next clip coming up as well for mansplaining. Because, at least at this part of the run, there's two very precise clips. The one that we had just seen, Shabu attempt, but now coming into the copied city, I'm also sort of intrigued as to what he's going to do.
Yes, this one is a little less precise, but it is still definitely very tough.
A little bit of swag with that plunge there.
There's a lot of very slippery environment in this game.
So Archmage coming to about the 2/3 mark on Groon. Again, I'm not too certain on what angle Shabu needs for level 3 Virtuous Contract on this clip, but it is rather different than what I'm used to using Virtuous Contract level 2.
Looks like he may be a little too far left on the plunge. If I'm going off of the angle that is maybe 20% consistent for me.
Oof, Adam giving him a little bit of a hard time.
The core of humanity is conflict. They fight, steal, kill.
Fortunately, one of the main things to point out about speedrunning this game is that if you aren't able to complete or do any of the skips, none of them are technically required. You can still go through the game and not do any of these tricks that we see in the speedrun and still be able to finish a run. Nothing that we do in terms of the speed tech is actually required. If you can't do one of the tricks, you can just as easily do the normal route. With obviously the tricks that we do here, saving a little bit of time in some of these sections. Sorry?
Right. Yeah, one of the coolest things for me with this run is how there's multiple different options for doing the same skips. A lot of the high jump skips that you can do many different ways. The sequencing of the attacks that you use to gain height and stuff like that can change from runner to runner, and that's completely fine. There are optimal strats, but they're not required, and a lot of them doing suboptimal strats will only lose you a fraction of a second.
But there's a good amount of variety in terms of how a skip can actually be done. And we'll see that in a couple minutes here for Shabu, but between high jumps and knowing what abilities and moves that you can do in a given high jump or long jump move, it really adds a sort of uniqueness to how a runner plays through the speedrun. Which is one of the main aspects of why I thought this run was really cool, is that you can actually be rather unique in the way that you run this. Albeit, you don't have total freedom, like some speed games, but there is a good amount of sort of uniqueness that you can apply your own knowledge of how things work between just simple high jumps or more complex high jumps, and still be able to do things quickly.
I suppose he might know something. Pascal, can you hear me?
Oh, hello, 2B. Do you need something?
I need to know if you've seen any new trends.
So, Archmage just coming out of Gruen there?
Trends? Well, 2 days ago I was contacted by some machines that disconnected themselves from the network.
And Shabu making his way to the factory.
Apparently, they're seeking to form an alliance of some kind with our village.
If that's what they want, why don't they move in?
I believe they're working on building a colony of their own.
You don't say.
Indeed. Apparently, it's located in the abandoned factory. I can give you the coordinates if you'd like.
Please.
I was actually planning to go speak with them myself, you know. Maybe we can meet up over there?
Sounds good.
Target location data obtained. Marking on map.
So, one of the things to point out here on Shabu's screen is, well, as most of the other runners have also tried, surprisingly, or it is said that doing this pantsuit strat on 2B is mildly faster than her slow walk, or so I was told, but is mostly swag. Because at least in this part of the game, we're really sort of waiting for things to happen for us. Like when we talk to this priest machine, we, no matter what, have to wait the 18 seconds or so that it takes him to walk from one position and press the button on the elevator. Archmage also going for the swag plunge along the side of the copied city there. And it doesn't look like Shabu's finding the right angle on that clip out there, but we'll take it. We'll see how Archmage does on mansplaining.
Ooh, looked good for a second there.
So why are you still
Very
I guess we
close.
never really explained mansplaining. The idea behind it is that in this first phase of fighting Adam in the copied city is basically to skip part of his really, really long monologue. And we're able to do that by going and hitting a dialogue trigger that's located within the same elevator that we entered the arena in. Or the area, rather. And it didn't look like she got it there, but ideally you would have clipped out of the arena and run over to the elevator, and at a specific dialogue line, hit that dialogue in the elevator and effectively save like 50 seconds or something. Somewhere around there. So it looks like on Shabu's screen he's opting to kill most of these machines in this room. The idea being that you have to kill a certain number of these machines in this room in order for the dialogue to progress. It is also worth noting that you can clip out of this room that he's fighting in now and just immediately have the dialogue start. Which is a little more consistent because sometimes those mobs really take a lot longer than needed to just die. So a lot of runners have opted to just clip out of bounds. So here looks like Shabu went for another strategy of clipping out of that room. Effectively, that respawns the elevator to that one room, and he's now able to go back up to the same room that he was just in, and this clip is a lot more complex than most of the other stuff. It is a lot more difficult to practice outside of runs, and the timing is very sort of precise. So the idea is that he's clipped out of this room high above the rest of the map, and he's trying to drop down to a specific place on the map to hit a trigger that you need to progress through the rest of the area. And nice, he got that there. So using the same technique of voiding out of the map, you're just far enough to actually void out and still return up to that top area. It's still a safe clip, but still pretty nice. And the gist of that is to hit that trigger, void back up to the room high above the deep factory, and then go and aim directly towards the end of the deep factory and skip the entire section. Ooh, Archmage is taking a little bit of a detour there because it looks like, yeah, under normal circumstances, you would be able to read the mail in Resistance Camp after having skipped whatever active dialogue happens after talking to an enemy, which I believe Shabu had done beforehand, but taking a little bit of an older pathing for Archmage is a little bit slower, but is still fast nonetheless.
I got it. I've been keeping an eye on you. I'm gonna shut off
So
the factory now.
back to Shabu, who is just hanging around on a boss known as Soshi.
92, 95.
Funny enough, you can actually just hang there indefinitely.
You can also soft lock.
Yeah, hopefully not soft lock.
But hopefully
Ideally not
that.
soft lock.
You actually can completely clear the top of that bridge, in which case you fall in the lava, it doesn't do any damage, and you're just stuck there.
So now that the lights go out, Soshi's shield goes down, and you're able to damage the boss.
Oh no, that is a very rare attack.
A little bit scary there. Some of those exploders can... I don't believe they can one-shot you, but they can two-shot you, right? Yes. I know they're pretty scary. Although with defensive buffs, I don't believe he was in much danger.
Right. Yeah, I don't believe so either, but they are scary. They do a lot of damage.
Now, as 6 points out, will Shabu go for Shabu clip?
He is.
Oh, and it looks like he's going for it.
Oh.
Nice. Oh, a little bit unclear on that angle there. Oh, jeez. Well, he's still able to showcase that out of bounds, though. That was pretty nice. So, that out of bounds effectively skips a small little run through some of the catwalks that we would otherwise have to run through, and is really just swag.
Yeah, it can save a minor amount of time. Those winding pathways are not exactly fun to navigate on your way out. which that skip will skip over them. Getting that out of bounds clip is a little weird, especially if you happen to have sold your minimap chip, which a lot of the runners will opt to do for extra chip space. Shabu looks to have kept it, probably for that reason.
What about you?
Oh, I'll probably wander back to the village. I have plenty on my plate there.
I see.
This is the resistance camp.
Say again? I'm not receiving.
Scanning for interference.
The machine requesting backup. Forces in range. Please, we can...
Let's move.
I actually believe Shabu is also on PB pace. I believe.
Why are their numbers increasing like this?
It looks like it.
Because I believe his best time, I know he said he had one that he lost the splits for, like he lost the picture of him. But I believe he said he had a sub 140, but it's like just lost. It's been lost to the world. So it looks like both of these runners are on pretty sizable PB pace.
Oh, and it looks like Archmage, she's aiming to go for the long run through the Deep Factory.
Completely understandable. Factory is, without a doubt, the hardest skip to learn, especially if you're coming straight or fresh out of the gate. And you've only been trying to learn for about a month. It's a tough one.
Some very nice combat from Shabu here in the Resistance camp. Generally making that fight all within one buff cycle is very fast. Or relatively fast, I'd say. I'm still pretty bad at that fight.
The problem I see with that fight is if you kill the initial mobs too quickly, then the stubbies can spawn behind you.
Yeah, I get that way too often.
What a lot.
A little bit of a scary experience for Archmage there with the Crushers.
Local machine life forms are converging on the area.
This is never going to end.
Hypothesis. The Goliath class enemy screen.
But overall, a very fast Bokushi for Shabu. This is just about to get off that SD at the very end there, but it looks like he missed out on that. That would otherwise grant him a little bit more experience. But it looks like he should be fine in terms of getting level 20 by the final fight.
They're still coming? What do we do? There's too many.
2B? 2B, can you hear me? Our village is under...
Pascal? Come in, Pascal! Shit!
So as Shabu goes and makes his way towards Pascal's fence to fight Core 2, he's taking a bit of an interesting path here, right next to the machines on this overpass. It was a little bit older of a routing. I don't believe I've seen anybody really do that more recently.
Hey, I do.
You still do?
Yeah, I still go up on the bridge. Most runs I do. It's kind of weird. Sometimes I just decide that I don't want to, but my typical routing is going up on the bridge.
Let's take these guys out first.
Yeah, it's very similar in time going up on the bridge versus just going straight. Going up on the bridge, you lose time because you're taking a vertical, what we would coin as a vertical zigzag,
Vertical zigzags,
you're not following a correct beeline to your next objective, but you kind of save the time spent to get up there from the plunge at the end. So they're very similar in time.
I need you to locate Eve's current position.
Location has been detected and placed on map.
We'll take care of Eve.
You just worry
I believe some of the stream sort of choppiness on Shabu's end is more, I believe, with his internet connection. Either that or it's Twitch's end. I'm not too certain.
Yeah, he's been having some issues with his OBS lately.
Oh, very close on platforms there. He still manages to skirt by it, just barely though. It looked like he was about to lift off. Oh, and it looks like he's going for phase 2 skip as well. This looks promising. Effectively, what this does is make sure that Eve doesn't hit 100% HP when he's healing up, and once the dialogue hits a specific point in the dialogue, Eve just instantly phase transitions into the cutscene. But it didn't look like he got it there, so it's a little bit of a time loss, having to wait for 9S to fully hack Eve and get his HP bar down. And now transitioning into Eve phase 3. Now he's a flying boy, running all over the place. It's a little bit difficult to see exactly what Shabu is doing, but effectively he's trying to melee attack and pod fire and pod program Eve as often as he can, so that way when Eve stands still, he can put as much damage as he possibly can onto him. Because Eve likes to move around a lot, it's quite difficult to sometimes hit him. And then transitioning into the final phase, Shabu is locked into a slow walk, having to pod fire and strictly pod fire Eve all the way down until 0 HP. Oh, opting to not lock on for Eve is a little bit of an interesting strategy, because when locked on, the pod fire actually sort of spreads quite drastically into the farther away the target, the less accurate the pod's minigun fire is. And so if you unlock, you're actually a lot more accurate at hitting your target, albeit that's still dependent on if the runner can aim the pod fire on Eve. But down Eve goes. Looks like Shabu's going to finish about 137, 30 something. Ooh, 24.
Yeah, I believe that's about a 2-minute PB for him. Pretty sizable PB. It looks like Archmage could possibly PB by even 10 minutes.
PogChamp.
Or, well, maybe not 10 minutes, but like 5 to 6 probably. There's been some really big time
PB.
saves. Yeah.
So switching over to Archmage, just entering the resistance camp.
Also, it seems we have Shabu here.
Howdy.
Hey, man.
Hey.
I'll wait.
So,
Congrats, my dude.
Ah, thanks. That's pretty happy with that run. There was obviously a few things. VC3, I don't know any of the lineups, so...
It's understandable. That was about a 2-minute PB, right? Or 3?
Recorded PB. Yeah.
Recorded.
Poggers.
I mean,
Very
and
nice.
by recorded, I mean, like, on this. Yeah. Yes, sure. How do I restart my splits?
What? You can just leave them if you want. It's fine.
Mouse cursor re.
You again?
So Archmage is just coming into Bokushi here. What's interesting about Bokushi is actually the electricity sort of changing around the dynamic of the fight, because under normal circumstances the floor technically would be lava, but at least in the speedrun, because of the help of the resilience chip, it's a lot more trivialized in some respects.
It really comes down to just healing properly, making sure you don't get staggered, and putting out some damage glitches.
2B, you okay?
I'm fine.
This core has a very, very odd hitbox. So dragging it up on this hill increases your likelihood of actually hitting it. It helps a lot, especially with attacks.
Nice.
Not like this one. That was a good attack. The core does have some attacks where it will hover a bit higher off of the ground and shoot down towards you. Those attacks are a little harder to hit it. The hitbox is only on the core for that for the first one, whereas on the second one, hitting any part of the snake-like body of it is also the hitbox. It can be very odd. There's some very odd hitboxes in this run, and core 1 is probably one of the weirdest.
I struggle with that fight even today. Like, it's one of those fights that can also get really out of hand really quickly based on which attacks that the core chooses. As Marble said, some of them go like a lot higher into the sky. I wouldn't really say into the sky, but a lot higher than where the player is, and if your positioning isn't exactly the greatest, it can really sort of make the fight go a lot slower.
Sealed off the entrance to the village and are trying to hold them off, but with these weapons, there's only so much we can do.
Let's take these guys out first.
I'm always scared when Core 2 goes that far over, close to the cliff face there. I have had it where the core that you're supposed to damage goes all the way down into that ravine, otherwise known as Panpipe's Pit, but we'll leave it at that.
We'll take care of Eve.
You just worry about keeping the village safe, okay?
Do be careful.
So making our way to Eve.
Everything must die! Why did you kill my brother?
Fortunately, Archmage is level 20 in this fight. Sometimes when you're a little underleveled, say level 19 or level 18, it's a little bit of a damage loss there, and oof. It looks like she got platforms as well. So for people who have played this casually, even myself too, it never felt like this was all that great of a boss fight, considering how these moving platforms are very trolly and not exactly the most easy things to navigate. Most often with Eve attacking the player, you end up getting knocked off quite easily. And especially when Eve goes up here, it's quite annoying. So ideally, trying to skip that phase of his attacks would be the best time save in this fight.
He's absorbing the life force of whatever's left on the network.
Damn it! We'll never get anywhere like this. I'm going to try hacking into Eve and shutting him down. Back me up, 2B!
On it. Protecting Unit 9S while he hacks the system.
The enemy is connected to a vast network. Analysis. The actions of Unit 9S...
So now just trying to get Eve down to threshold again, and 9S hacking in.
Or attempting there a little bit. Yeah, 9S is a little weird with the hacking. Sometimes it just will refuse to transition. We found that kind of pushing 9S a little bit will typically speed up the process if the hacking gets stuck. Don't really understand what causes it to just stop like that, but sometimes it'll be right at the end and you just won't finish the hack.
Alert. NFCS destroyed. Close range combat no longer operable.
That attack can be a little bit scary in the final phase of Eve. Doing the attack kind of spam that he has, it's a little scary with even with the resilience. It can kind of stack up hits on you. It's been worse than it is now. The fight has been a lot worse. It's a little more optimized, but it can be a little scary, especially for the runners who opt not to use defense buffs. This looks to be a... what is this? Let's see.
47.
So that should be about a... yeah, it looks like about a 4-minute PV. Pretty solid.
Well, just barely sub 147.
Very nice. So we had 2 PBs in that race. It was very good. About a 4-minute PB for Archmage and about a 3-minute PB for Shabu. I believe that would bring the PB counter to 4 already. Only 5 races into the tournament?
Somewhere around there. I could have sworn that more people had PB'd during this tournament.
I'm not sure. Because I know Questeka did, and Shabu, Archmage, and Fudge also PB'd.
But GG to the runners. There's going to be a lot more runs like these and races over the next couple weeks. As well, I think right now, I think they're setting up for another race between Shabu Shabu, and Fullest. There will also be another one of these races at 10 p.m. Eastern between 6 and Icefire. So back to back to back Nier runs all day, essentially. But in all, I want to say thanks to Speed Gaming for helping us put on this tournament. Thank you to the runners for racing today, previous days as well, earlier today as well, and later tonight as well. Lots of really close races lined up for the next couple of weeks. I forget what the command is in chat for the links, but for the bracket, I think it's tourney.nearspeedrun.com. And as well, speedgaming.org/NA for the tournament schedules. In terms of learning how to speedrun Nier Automata, we have a Discord. If you want to check it out, it's, I believe, discord.nearspeedrun.com. Yeah, there's links in the chat if you guys want to check it out for future runs, past runs, how to run. But yeah.
A very solid race. I believe we're going to have Archmage in for a second here for thoughts on the race. And then we will set up for the next one.
Hey.
Oh.
PV?
Yeah,
PV.
easy. Easy
Nice.
PV. That's my first sub 150.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a lot of good in there, and
yeah,
the combat was
like
very good.
5 golds. Yeah.
Howdy.
I made like a lot of decisions where I was like, I can't do this skip, so I'll just do it like the slow, reliable way.
Right. Yep. Yeah, some of the skips, they don't actually save as much time as one would think, and if you don't feel consistent with it, you can just go around and it's fine.
Yeah.
I think we're getting kicked off by Speed Gaming. They've already transitioned.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Oh, thanks.
Yep. Solid
GG's,
race,
guys.
Yep. GG.
GG. Good race.
Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to Marbles for being here with me. And thank you to Speed Gaming for hosting this. There's a good number of races coming up as well. Again, check out the links in chat if you want to check out the scheduling and bracket. And I'm going to get some dinner. Take care, guys.